Right. For the last 2 years, Choi Chong-kyung was a top performer among the North Korean IT workers, generating tens of thousands of dollars for the regime through his work for US companies. He would use stolen identities, fake profiles to apply for the job. Occasionally, he would outsource the interviews to US citizens. His biggest success was infiltrating a US non-profit organization where he earned over $158,000 in 1.5 years. When his last employer terminated his contract, he decided to extort them. He threatened them to leak proprietary data unless he's paid. And that's exactly what happened. Choi is a part of broader North Korean effort to generate money for the regime. And he's also a part of the story that I want to share with you today. But I won't be speaking exclusively about the North Korean activities, but more broadly about employment scams. My name is Ondra Rojčík. I work as a cyber threat intelligence analyst at Red Hat, where I'm part of the internal CTI team. Before that, I worked for NUKIP, the Czech National Cybersecurity Agency, where I co-founded and led for 5 years the strategic CTI function. Before that, I worked for NATO and for a few other Czech government organizations. So today we will start by discussing how North Koreans are using job interviews to deliver malware. We will also look at North Korean IT workers getting employment by Western companies, and we will touch on interview cheating and identity spoofing. And lastly, we will talk about recommendations and how to protect ourselves against these threats. Let's start with North Koreans and their affection for the Western job market. Although their thinking is formed by the rigid command economy of North Korea, where everything is planned in advance by the central government, they definitely understand the basic dynamics of the job markets outside of their country. They understand that we want to get the best jobs possible, and that it's very difficult to resist attempting of attractive career opportunities. But they also abuse the other side of the equation. They don't offer just fake interviews, fake jobs, but also fake workforce. Actually, the workforce is real, but their identities are faked. The problem is that there are EU-US regulations that prohibits employment of North Koreans. So if their government want them to work for Western companies, they need to provide them with fake identities. I have to admit that I was kind of lured into the research of the topic through the North Korean aspect of it. But as you will see, it's much more broader topic around recruitment scams that goes beyond North Korea. So we'll start by exploring the scams targeting our desire to seek better jobs. North Koreans are not the only one aiming at job seekers, but they are definitely very visible and very active in the last couple of years. The earliest example of North Korean operation was the Operation Dream Job that was first reported by security vendor Clear Sky in 2020. The attackers usually create fake profile on LinkedIn, posing as recruiters of reputable companies. In the Dream Job operation, it was Boeing and Lockheed Martin. In other campaigns, they would pose as recruiters for Meta or Facebook. They would usually communicate via LinkedIn messaging or WhatsApp. Another campaign used advertisements on job search platforms where they posed as a prospective employer. This time the advertisements were anonymous and purposefully vague, so that there was no any indication of the prospective employer. Very often these campaigns target software developers who are connected and asked to participate in a job interview. During these interviews, they are instructed to download and run software from sources like GitHub to participate in a coding challenge. Once the developer runs the software, very often they get infected. That is not the only way, however, how they distribute the malware. They also use Trojanized PDF viewers with supposedly full job description, like in this case, or Trojanized VPN clients, or the malware could be delivered through the communication through WhatsApp. In other cases, the attackers who got access to corporate endpoints collected intelligence regarding the company, their activity and its financial affairs. There is a double motivation, because a part of that they also focus on the individual software developers, where most of these malware has to do with the info stealers that we have about the previous talk. So they would collect information such as cryptocurrency wallets, credentials, authentication cookies. So this double motivation of espionage and money theft is kind of unique for the North Koreans, who are after both information and money. By the way, I need to do a kind of shout out to Asset. They are doing a great job in tracking the North Korean activities. Recently, there was they identified indicators that proved that the North Korean campaigns that are targeting or that are abusing the fake interviews and also the fake IT workers or North Korean IT workers, that these campaigns overlap. It looks like North Koreans are real leaders in this area, because they are inspiring other cyber criminals to do similar looking campaigns. In a recent one, the job seekers were asked to download a fake video call software called Grasko, which is in fact an info stealer. The campaign was attributed to a Russian-speaking group. What can we do about these threats? Here is a very short list of hopefully effective recommendations, verify the legitimacy of the people that you communicate with. This is easier said than done, but even very basic verification can help a lot. You should be cautious about GitHub accounts with few repositories and very limited activity. And if you are working on a coding challenge, run it in isolated environment. If you believe you've been a victim of a malicious activity on a corporate device, you may feel uncomfortable to do that, but it's definitely better to report it to your information security team. Now, North Koreans abuse also the other side of the equation. The desire of organizations to get the best possible talent, including North Korean talent. But before we get into that, let's do a small step back and look at the topic from a slightly historic perspective. The North Korean rigid economy sucks. It's inefficient, outdated, it fails to meet the basic needs of its people. Now add to that the crippling effect of international sanctions that were imposed on North Korea in 2006, and you get really dire situation. North Koreans, in order to survive and in order to get some money into the economy, they need to be very creative. And they definitely were in the last 20 years. They have shown a great adaptability in finding alternative ways to make money. One of my very first assignments at the Czech Ministry of Interior that I joined many years ago was to analyze and kind of sort out the issue of North Korean sewing machine operators that were working for dozens of companies around Czech Republic. North Koreans are not worried to send their people to work abroad. It's not just sewing machine operators, it's also shipyard workers, construction site workers, and many other manual work. The idea of allowing IT workers to be employed by foreign companies is just a digital age extension of the very same playbook. And that's what we will be talking about in the next chapter. Similarly to the fake interviews by North Koreans, this issue became much more prominent in 2024. Great original source of information provided two US indictments, one from December last year and one from January this year. They include many interesting details. Some of them I would like to share with you through a couple of little stories. These stories are based on the information in the indictments, but I also use a couple of assumptions to keep the narrative of these stories coherent. So I have already introduced you to Choi Chong-kyung, who made $158,000 in 1.5 years and extorted his last employer when his contract was terminated. Not all of the North Koreans were as successful as Choi. While others made tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, Chang Cho-myung's career was short-lived. He followed the very same playbook. He would use stolen US identity, fake profiles to apply for a job. But very soon he made a critical mistake. He accessed his work laptop from inside China, setting off red flags. Just 4 days after hiring him, his employer terminated the contract. His entire employment with as an IT worker for foreign companies lasted just a few weeks, netting him something around $2,000. Unlike the star performers who thrived for years in the operation, it seems that Chang's mistake costed him his place in the network. Chong Song-hwa oversaw the network of North Korean IT workers. He was tasked with generating $10,000 per worker per month. He was also quite creative manager. He was organizing socialism competitions among his workers to encourage higher income or earnings. When a US company uncovered one such scheme and terminated an account, Chong ordered extortion. He ordered to demand payment for proprietary data and release them when the payment was refused. The whole network managed to earn around 88 million US dollars in between 2019 and 2024. The North Koreans registered a couple of domains, created websites that appeared to belong to legitimate US businesses. These businesses did not actually exist, but the North Koreans would use them in their CVs and applications that they had previously worked for these companies. Many of them are now seized by the FBI. In some cases, they simply stole not just the design, but also a content of a whole web page of an existing business. But as you can see, for some reason, they didn't really share their stance on Ukraine. Going through the data from the indictments provided a couple of very interesting insights. One of them is that the median monthly salary for the North Koreans was around $5,000, which is not bad. At the same time, they certainly had some operational costs. One of them was a payment of $1,000 per week to US citizens for impersonation. My understanding from what I found in the indictment is that one US person would impersonate multiple North Koreans. Although North Koreans are fairly successful at filling open positions, they are not doing that great. They kind of struggle to keep their jobs for a significant amount of time. On average, they would stay with one organization for approximately 6 months, and in some cases, it was just a couple of weeks. Based on all these data, we can make an estimate of the scale, of approximate scale of the whole operation. We can take into account the total amount that they made, which is $88 million. And if my calculations that you can see here make sense, we could estimate that the operation involves something between 700 to 900 people, but the range could be, of course, broader. There is a couple of uncertain things. I've read assessments talking about thousands of North Koreans working for US, European, Asian companies. This could be realistic as well because the indictment very likely doesn't cover the whole endeavor. Personally, I would consider this a successful operation. It's not as profitable as other North Korean cyber criminal activities, but still a success. From this perspective, a surprising part of the operation were the extortions. As I see it, it was quite a redundant part of the operation because it attracted a lot of attention. The impacted companies, they had to get in touch with law enforcement, started the conversation with law enforcement. I would assume, they would start sharing the stories with industry peers, and in some cases they would even go and share the information publicly. This putting the entire operation at risk for just a few $1,000s. But who am I? I really don't know. I'm not running $88 million scam operation, so I'm not sure if this was really worth it. Why should we actually care whether our co-workers, working colleagues come from North Korea? There are some financial and legal implications to that. As I already mentioned, employing North Koreans is a violation of UN sanctions and EU and US regulations. So there could be potentially some legal consequences. In many past cases, it was also quite costly for the companies, mainly the leak proprietary data. The cost could be in hundreds of thousands of dollars. There are also possible costly business disruptions, and the cost of rehiring and onboarding of new employees need to be taken into account as well. You don't want to waste time of your talent acquisition people, HR, hiring managers, your colleagues, your own time. Hiring and onboarding, as many of you know, can be time intensive. As you all know, COVID moved many job-related activities into the virtual space. And the hiring process is not an exception. It also opened opportunities for, not just for malicious actors, but for all sorts of scams and cheating, including interview cheating. The following examples on the next 3 slides have nothing to do with North Korea. They are just the extension of the topic of virtualization of hiring process, and also the AI revolution in the last 2 years. Recently, we had a candidate at Red Hat who performed exceptionally well in the virtual technical interview, but there was something fishy about his responses because they were textbook precise, and the candidate did quite a long pause before providing each answer. Since there were some concerns, he was invited for a next round of interview in person. During the on-site interview, the candidate suddenly struggled with technical questions, even on topics he had done very well before. This raised, of course, suspicion that he might have used an AI speech-to-text tool to cheat during the virtual interview. Such experience is by no means unique to Red Hat. Some people are even trying to make a legitimate business on AI-facilitated cheating, such as the main character of this article. Another curious case that we recently had was when we hired a contractor after a series of virtual interviews. But on the very first day when he get to the office, his colleagues and his manager was a little bit surprised when he met a different person that they were interviewing. That was reported back to the contracting agency, which after a bit of pressure confirmed that indeed it is not the same person. We will slowly transition into the final now what part. In other words, what to do about these threats. But before I do it fully, I'll show you a case that is loosely connected to some of these issues that we discussed until this point. David Mochadwo shared recently on LinkedIn his story. He shared a recording of a candidate likely using a face modification software. It was the second similar case in a short period of time, so David was prepared and recorded the interview. To make sure that the candidate is not using face modification software, David asked him to wave his hand in front of his face, which the candidate refused to do. He refused to follow the instructions. He was waving next to his face and then terminated the call. The waving could help to detect the use of face modification software, although it's not as straightforward as you might think. You wouldn't see the hand behind the face, but there will be some weird interactions between the hand and the face. In the comments below the post, a lot of folks made links to the North Korean activities, but there is nothing that would directly, clearly link it to North Koreans. At the same time, it's a plausible hypothesis that could explain the motivation for identity spoofing. Regarding the now what or recommendations of what to do about all these threats, there is definitely not any universal good advice that would cover all of them. But if we start with the North Korean IT workers, the recommendations have usually to do with the following. At least the final stage or one stage of the interviews should ideally be on site. This recommendation covers a lot of ground. If this is not possible, or for the online part of the interview, require all candidates to turn on their camera and record the interview. If during a video call you suspect use of face modification software, similar to what David did in the case that I showed you before, you can ask the candidate to wave their hand in front of their face. If there are some weird interactions, it's likely that there is a face modification software. To identify or what I mean by the weird interactions, to identify the face modification software, look for inconsistent eye blinking, poor lips synchronization. They pointed out also irregular shadowing, or in some cases, artificial noise, because some folks might even use voice or sound modification. Require government issue IDs to be verified by a third party. This sounds super bureaucratic and super annoying, but it's a very powerful thing to do. Check LinkedIn, GitHub, and work history for inconsistencies. This sounds super obvious, but you would be surprised how little attention there is in the hiring practice to these issues. absence of digital footprint could also be considered a red flag. Here is a nice and simple example of what to look for when performing the due diligence part and background checks. One email is connected to more people or names or personas, if you like. They also used manipulated stock photos at the applicant's professional profiles. This can be easily reverse searched. Although the known before case, which is the bottom right corner, was very high profile. I'm quite sure that North Koreans will not be using stock pictures anymore, but there are few other tools these days that can help you much better. Prevention is one thing, but you might unknowingly already be employing North Koreans even now in your organization. This is a very deep topic. I don't dare to go into too many details here, but some of the areas of the detection and threat hunting have to do with use of multiple IPs within a short span of time and use of unauthorized remote access tools. But both of these are very much organizational specific, and each organization has very different patterns around these issues. You can also try to detect for laptop farms in US and potentially Europe that are used by North Koreans for spoofing their physical presence in the region. And there are, of course, also publicly shared atomic indicators. If you keep your data for some reasonable time, they are still great tool for retrospective hunt. If you want more details on the detection and threat hunting part, please check the links or the reports by Mandiant and DTEX. Concerning the interview cheating, the list could be quite long again, but one measure beats all the others, on-site interviews. But that is not always practical. So do the on-site interviews, especially in case if you suspect something. And if on-site interview is not possible at all, try to identify overly polished responses, try to probe with follow-up questions. Again, require all candidates to turn on their camera and observe the candidates' eye movement, overall body language, or unusual delay before providing the answer. Things that I mentioned before. Just be aware that these are the type of things that are addressed by, for example, by the dude that decided to make a business on AI-facilitated interview cheating that I've shown you a couple of slides ago. If suspicions arise, ask variations of the same technical questions across multiple rounds of interview, or ask candidates to explain their reasoning rather than simply expect correct answer. The list, as I said, could go on. I would say that the important thing here is to create awareness and create security culture around these issues so that your colleagues understand that if they see something risky, it's a good idea to consult resources or reach out to their colleagues responsible for the security of the information of the organization. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now or once I'm off the stage. Anyone? Okay, sir? Do we get the mic or? Sorry, there's so much noise that there. Oh, okay, sorry. There is a mic somewhere here. Okay, thank you.
Just wanted to ask you if you have any experience with hiring people who are local to the people who you're hiring, and they can do on-site interview.
Experience with hiring people. Sorry.
So if you are not able to do on-site interview, do you have any experience to do the interview where the candidate is with somebody that you trust?
Aha. So like outsource the interview to somebody.
Correct.
Who can do it on-site, but in different location. We like. At Red Hat, we don't do it this way. Yeah, it's usually either virtual interview or on site. Yeah, no other alternative. Yeah. All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.